Hello there, it's time for PressPass. This is what we have lined up.
Many people have got the connotation that family, when you talk of family planning, then you are talking of the numbers. Either you increase or you decrease. But
tonight, we analyze and scrutinize a feature that aired last night on teen moms of Kwale and their use of contraceptives.
We're worried as a church, and we don't want to encourage the discussion of comprehensive sex education in our schools.
Is the Anglican Church opposed to sex education in schools? We put that into perspective. And Kenya Jury's report will later on give us a blow-by-blow account of the action-packed week that has been. So let me introduce you to my guests this evening on PressPass. And we have two ladies and a gentleman. And I'll start with Dr. Christine Sadia. She is a public health specialist and has been so for many years, and a consultant also on gender matters. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have Collins Baswani. He is a DSW Public Communications Officer. He'll tell us a bit more about what DSW does. It is a German organization that deals with public health and matters as such. And she's no stranger to our viewers. Mercy Juma Okande. She is the person who did that good report last evening on the teen moms of Kwale. And this is what we really have tonight to use as our foundation of discussion. And I want to give us just a bit of a background. Many Kenyan societies are yet to accept the reality of adolescent premarital sexuality, particularly for girls. Most parents do not believe that their teenage children are engaging in sex, but statistics show otherwise, with a sexual debut in Kenya placed at 15 years and even lower. Here's an excerpt of the teen moms of Kwale.
The 2014 Demographic Health Survey shows that 1 in 2 women in Kenya aged between 20 to 49 had first sexual intercourse by age 18, and 1 in 10 women of the same group had first sexual intercourse by age 15. 1 out of 4 Kenyan women aged 25 to 49 have given birth by age 18, while 1 in 2 have given birth by age 20. For these mothers, the decision to put their daughters on contraceptive is driven by one desire: to see them complete at least their primary education. They know this is the only way they will get a chance to avoid the hardship that poverty has thrust upon them.
many people have got the connotation that family, when you talk of family planning, then you are talking of the numbers. Either you increase or you decrease. But actually, that's not the issue. The issue is, what is the appropriate time for you to get pregnant, and how many children are you ready to take care in your lifetime?
Ironically, in this county and indeed other parts of the country, teenagers are seeking contraception services, but the adults are not. The result, an upsurge of many large families that are struggling. Some adults are simply not keen on family planning, while others say they have tried different methods of birth control but gave up after the methods failed. The unmet need for family planning is currently at 23% in Kenya, meaning 2 in 10 women would like to delay or stop childbearing but are not using any methods of contraception.
Wamezaliwa mapacha pamoja na huyo Hassan. Hao wako na miaka 14.
Darus Adam and Monatumu Salim, residents of Shimoni in Kwale County, have had 12 pregnancies in their 16 years of marriage. They are both 38 years old.
Mara nyingi tunaweza sema ni mipango ya Mungu. Kwa sababu mipango ya Mungu vile iko, unaweza ukasema mimi nataka watoto 2, kumbe usipate. Ukataka 3, kumbe usipate. Lakini mimi maximum nilikuwa na tarajia nipate kama 4, 5 tu hivi.
Sikutegemea kama nitapata watoto kama hao. Kwa sababu nilijaribu njia nyingi tu kwamba nizae watoto kidogo niweze kuwashughulika. Lakini kila njia niliyojaribu sikufanikiwa. Nikaona afadhali nizae tu.
Those are just a couple of minutes of the 19-minute piece that aired last night on NTV Weekend Edition. But you can find the full edition on our YouTube page, NTV YouTube page, that is. And the story that was done by a team, that is Mercy Juma Okande and Robert Gishira behind the camera, Terezia Wakabi, the editor, Job Soy, and Ali Yunus, the graphics designers. Important to name the team behind it all. Now, Mercy, just to give us a background of how long this took you and what was your motivation, and do you feel that you actually achieved what you had set out?
Thanks, Mark. For me, I think my motivation to do this story was basically the reproductive health care bill and the attention that it was receiving, both the negative and positive. I don't know how you would choose to say which side is positive, which side is negative, depending on what you want to believe. And just the fact that the bill by Senator Sijeni drew a lot of reaction, where some people feel that introduction of comprehensive sexual education in schools is a no-no, others are supporting it. Yeah. And I felt that some of us make our arguments or base our decisions and whatever we say when out in public based on maybe what we feel as individuals, but we don't really know what is happening on the ground. I am not demonizing whoever is supporting the comprehensive sexual education or whoever is not supporting, but I just felt that it is good for people out there to know what is happening on the ground. And then they can make a decision for themselves and see whether they're going to support young girls being put on contraceptives or not, based on what they see. Because I think if you tell a story from the point of view of when you have a central character or somebody who is going through all this, then it makes decision making and policy formulation much more easier.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll tell us a bit more of the dynamics, what it took to really get it out there, and who you partnered with. And Collins and Daktari, I'll ask you your overall view of the outcome of the story. Some of the views here, let's just sample some of the views as people were watching it. Catherine Zhao said on Twitter, very sad. We cannot continue to bury our faces in the sand as a country, must educate teenagers on sexuality. And next to that, we have Cleo Keith says, in 16 years, that lady has only rested for 4 years of not being pregnant. Well, I thought we'd be able to see that in our feed, but we're not, unfortunately. But these are just some of the reactions. Mostly people empathetic, or sympathetic rather, with the plight of the girls in Kwale, in the Wa village. Daktari, what was your initial reaction as you saw this 19-minute feature?
When I looked at it, from my perspective, it brought in a lot of dimensions, many dimensions.
Yes.
It was only not the health dimension, but it brought in a dimension that is very diverse and very rich, ranging from our socio-cultural issues, poverty, diversity, but also looking at the story itself. It puts into question the sampling that was done. If the same story was to be repeated in an urban setting with affluence, what could it have looked like? So it challenged my mind to look at those issues.
Okay.
As much as I was very empathetic and looking at the situation the way it is, and I think Kenyans, we need to wake up. It's a wake-up call for the majority of us.
Yes.
But for those of us who have been in the sector, it is not something new. It is the story that has been told over and over again, and I will call it in action. For those of us that are passionate about the health of adolescents and young people, this is a story that has been told as early as 80s. The first adolescent-friendly center was set up in Kenyatta. Many years. So this story is not a story that has not been told to Kenyans. It's a story that has been there, but I think what it needs to challenge, the conversation that it needs to provoke and to bring to the fore is, what are we doing, or what will we do differently so that we bring it to bear?
All right. Collins, Daktari says, and as the chair of the Kenya Medical Women Association, I'm sure she's interacted with a lot of data in this particular area of public health planning and what have you, and this is not new. What was your initial reaction as you watched the story, from your perspective?
All right. My initial reaction to the story was that this is actually one of the better stories that I've seen on this issue. I think, even from our previous conversations, one of the things that I've pointed out a few times is that I have always found it a bit difficult, simply because, when we write about the sexuality of adolescents, and teenagers in Kenya, we tend to, to focus on a very small aspect, say contraception, or sometimes we even, journalists sometimes, sensationalize, the story, and therefore you lose focus. So Mercy's story, according to, to my opinion, was a well balanced story. It was accurate. She referred to proper data from the KDHS. She also talked to a variety of people, right from the girl who has to leave school to go and breastfeed her child, all the way to a public health promotion officer, to parents, to her parents, and so on. So it was, I felt it was a well-balanced story, and this is something that can inform conversation.
Right.
Yes.
You'll tell us a bit more from your background as a development communications practitioner in interaction with media houses and trying to get this to the fore. Mercy, as Daktari says, it's not new. And what was the urgency in terms of why talk about it now? I guess it's really because of the bill. But from your experience, from what you've seen, it's been embedded culturally. What you found out?
It's true, Mark. It is not a new story. It has been told time and again. It has been told in different areas, all the way from Homa Bay to Western Kenya to the coast. Many journalists have told this story. But then, the issue is not about how many people have told this story.
Yes.
The issue is, what are we getting as a reaction from these stories? Because if I'm going to tell a story today and we don't get any reaction or any change from it, then 6 months later, I will find another angle or another region and go tell the same story until I see somebody acting. And I think that is what is lacking here, like Daktari said.
Yes.
We may have policies, we may have organizations dealing with all this, but we are not really seeing the action that is leading to the change that we need to see. So true, it is not, it has been told time and again, but again, there are so many ways or so many angles that you can tell a story on reproductive health, right, or sexual reproductive health. In 2013, I also did a story on contraceptives, but I linked it to unsafe abortions. That is something I didn't cover in this.
Yes.
Because if a teenage girl doesn't falls pregnant, they were not using contraceptives, and they are afraid to tell their parents or teachers, then what do? They go to the backstreet doctors, they procure unsafe abortions. So there's so many angles that you can do that link sexual and reproductive health, whether it's about teenagers or just women in general. And I think this is not the last time I'm telling this story. Right. And this is not the last time we are doing it until we see something being done.
Until we see something being done. Yeah. You were jotting something, I'll get to that. Daktari brought up the issue of, brought to question the data that we have, and whether we can put the spotlight on the urban populace or demographic, just to understand if the trend is more or less the same in terms of the use of contraceptives. When you're doing this particular story, who was your target, and in response to the question over the urban populace?
All right. My target here was the rural girl, because looking at just the burden of being an early mom. If you look at the urban populace, or if I go do this story in something like, and urban populace here, I mean a place like maybe here in Nairobi, a place like Pangani, the estate, or Komarok, or any of these estates, where the quality of life is not the same as that of that woman or that girl living in Kwale. The results may differ because of the exposure of these two communities or these two groups of people.
Right.
And also the results may differ because of the quality of life. The main reason why I did this in Kwale is because it is one of the poorest counties. So just looking at the burden of all these and then link it to poverty, and we are seeing, other than the teenage pregnancies and teenagers using contraceptives, there's this other part of families or men and women who are not using contraceptives, who the society is expecting that they will be using contraceptives, and then the large families and all that. Yeah. So that was what I wanted to put across. But if we did this in an urban population, then I think so many things will come into play, because somebody will ask about the exposure. And I don't know, but I feel
access
that,
as well.
Yes, access, and I feel I'm pretty sure would find that while on the other side, the parents are allowing their teenage daughters to do this. Maybe here in Nairobi, we are doing it. The teenagers are doing it, but the parents don't know.
Right. Dr. Ari, in response to that, I mean, this was a story targeting the poor, largely poor population from Kwale, and being able to perhaps capture the reality of the urban populace wasn't quite the target. But what were you trying to bring out in terms of the need to capture the urban populace?
I come from a school of thought that if you have to do, for example, she's mentioned the bill, which when I was coming here wasn't really the focus of my attention.
Yes.
But if you're talking about a bill, then we need to have evidence-based information, because a bill is not based out of a small sample. A bill is made for a national good. And therefore, it needs then to bring the issues on board of whether those disparity and whether they are happening in the rural or where they are happening in the urban setting, whether they are happening in different socioeconomic status, then we marry the issue, we marry the statistics of and the uniqueness of the different people, then we get a balanced bill.
Okay.
So that is where I was questioning, if we did here, what will we do? Because you've rightly mentioned issues of access. Is the girl who in Nairobi having an access? Is the girl who in Kwale know even about, and she's rightly said it, maybe exposure, the after morning pill maybe, which are some of the girls in Nairobi are using. So I guess coming from a policy background, I would want to have evidence on the table and not make a bill from emotions. Because I think if you make a bill from emotions, then you get it wrong. The reason why you get it wrong, because you have not convinced people that this is really a need-based issues, and therefore even policymakers or people who are doing financing, how do they then begin to look at those numbers and put finance to it?
Right. Important perspectives that need to come out, especially when telling the stories. But Mercy has said this is not the end of the discussion. It's just started the conversation. But like a story you'd see on the Standard, Basonyi, this is a fury over bill on reproductive health. And as you've said, Daktari, there's response based on ignorance, not really knowing what need is there in the Kenyan populace. And this was a story that was captured in June 20th, 2014. I hope you can see what I have here. Let me just add it, add here the perspective so you can probably see it, and turn it to my left area here. I don't know if it's okay now. Yes. So, Basonyi, you saw this story as we try to tell and give awareness to the populace about this particular bill and why there's fury over it. What was your initial reaction to this? Not initial reaction, but your perspective to this particular headline and the story as it was told?
As I've mentioned before, one of the challenges that this area of reporting faces is that maybe because of the pressure of wanting people to of selling the story, or maybe because of not understanding the issues in context.
And in this particular case,
in this particular case, I look at the headline, and for me especially the lead of the story. We have reduced the issue in the story to access to adolescents accessing condoms and pills, actually,
right.
and pills. And if you look at the the bill is is a very big document, and the bill addresses issues, I mean, in a bit in a much more comprehensive manner.
Yes.
And I feel that when that headline was being drafted, and when the lead was being written, and inaccuracy was thrown out of the window, because it is inaccurate. That lead is inaccurate. To
say that there's fury over this particular bill?
No. The lead of the story, reducing the contents of the entire bill to giving access to adolescents to pills.
The first line here goes: the parental consent is not mandatory for the children to access contraceptives. Has intensified opposition to the reproductive
there's a line
slightly
bill.
A sample of condoms with a picture.
A
proposal in a bill seeking to provide children as young as 10 years with condoms and birth control pills has sparked outrage.
Now, if you read the bill,
yes, it doesn't allow.
That line is not there.
Okay.
It may be implied, but that line is not there. And so, for that story actually, kills, the accuracy aspect of the bill. The bill is very comprehensive, and if I may,
yes,
I'd like to just, go back and maybe I can access that document a bit later on. But the bill, provides, it basically says that, that if I mean, in conversation, I think, in partnership with with the health ministry, other stakeholders could draft a framework where access to sexual and reproductive health services can be provided for young people. Actually, the word is youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health services. And so, youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health services is much more than just access to condoms and birth control pills.
Right.
This includes, access to, a facility that a young person would want to go to. This includes, counseling for these young people. This includes, providing information to these young people, and then, of course, now contraception. But it is not just about contraception. It's about the, the entire, spectrum of services to be delivered.
And just to mention that the nominated Senator Judith Sijeni, who had sponsored this bill, has sponsored this Reproductive Health Care Bill 2014, was meant to be in studio, but she had to be out of town. Would have loved to be here to at least inform this discussion. But Mercy, there's the aspect of how to tell the story and capture someone's attention. There's a shock effect that you'd see here in this particular line here. 10 years old children will be able to access condoms. But now with your story, were you trying to inform these stakeholders who are trying to put some laws and structures to govern the access of contraceptives?
Of course, at the end of the day, I think what we all want to achieve is to get to the policy makers and decision makers. So for me, it wasn't really about who is accessing condoms, who is accessing the pills or not. But the issue was what is happening. So you see, when you have the 13 or 14-year-old telling their story or saying why they decided to use this, I think it should jostle our minds and get us to think of what should be the next step. We have talked about abstaining, we have talked about all this, but still this is happening. So what do we do next?
Right.
Yeah, that is what I wanted to. And just to go back on the issue of if this story was done in an urban setting. Like, I remember there was a time we did a story on use of contraceptives, the morning after pills. And we did that in Nairobi. And we visited chemists in Nairobi on Sunday and Monday morning. And the pharmacists and the people at the chemist could tell you just how much emergency contraceptives they are selling on Sunday morning and on Monday morning, and to people who look like what age, because there is no law that says you should be of this age to access morning after pills or to access long-term methods of contraceptives. There's no law that says that. Government policy is that family planning services are going to be offered to any woman or man who is in need of them. It doesn't say you have to be of a certain age. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think what we are, or the people who are saying no, or who don't want this bill or anything to do with contraceptives for teenagers, we are basing that on maybe our beliefs, our traditions as Africans, or it is wrong, or we are promoting immorality and our religions.
In our religions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mark, just to add on what she's just pointed out. You see, if we sensationalize the story, if we we go for the shock effect, we sometimes lose the ability to have a constructive conversation, identifying where the issue is, and say, young people in Kenya are having sex, young people are becoming, adolescents in Kenya are having sex, adolescents in Kenya are, are getting pregnant, and that is the issue that we should be discussing, not other issues based on our feelings, because those are the facts.
Right.
And as Daktari had mentioned earlier, I think it would be unfair for us to to expect you know, a journalist such as Mercy to delve into, you know, into the data, because she told us where she got her data from.
The 2014 data?
Yes, the Kenya Demographic Health Survey 2014. That's where she got her data. And she actually worked with the official government numbers in the way they were presented. Yeah. So the data may not have aggregated, you know, the poor, the middle class, or, you know, the rich. She worked with what she had, and she told a story, and I think, you know, for me, I would not fault her for that. She used data, and she went to a place where, you know, there's an issue.
Yes.
You know, even in the community, you know, these guys will tell you this is something that you're facing.
Yes. Just before we take a break, Daktari, there's the chance that this would end up being a yes or no kind of storytelling format, where people present the pros and cons of having this particular healthcare bill. Yes, you said that you didn't quite come to discuss the bill, but in your years of practice as a public health strategist and planner and consultant, what's your desire in terms of seeing stories told? Is it in that format as a feature where you get the touch of someone's life personally, or is it from the stakeholders' perspective where you have the laws that are being brought into place?
I would like to commend the story for what it brings out, because it starts a conversation.
Yes.
Where people need to then begin to interrogate certain things that we are talking about. But I must also confess and say that this story, when Judith Sijenyi was being hit very hard, it's Kenya Medical Women's Association, though here I sit, I am the chair of the current chairperson of Kenya Medical Women's Association. But my colleagues previously who held the office, we went out to rescue Judith Sijenyi because, one, we thought that reproductive health is a medical bill, and it sorts the issues of health and issues of sexual reproductive health, which is in the domain of health majorly, but has implications, or the implications come from other dimensions. And we then decided as Kenya Medical Women's Association to be the voice of reason. And being the voice of reason, what we did was to use evidence-based, and actually we worked with a number of stakeholders, including the religious communities. Right. And when we put the evidence on the table, what was a no-go zone was sorted out. And we reached a point in December, on December 2nd at Fairview Hotel, we actually got a bill that they were comfortable with. And then the different interests started playing the issues of rights and what does it say, the Constitution says this, the different interpretation. But for us, we thought we had walked a mile, and that was accepted bill that could have given us a starting point where then you do the add-ons of what people have not been able to accept, because you see there's also the socialization. Yes. So if I've been socialized to believe this, you need to walk me up. But we already had a framework that could have started us on a good path while we walk, and bills are not cast in stone. They can be amended. They are not meant to be perfect. And up to that story, Kemwa did what they thought was an excellent job, until then it took a different tangent at another point in 2015. But what you're asking is, it is not a yes or no bill. Right. I guess we have a crisis in our hands. Like right now, if you look at HIV amongst the adolescents, that is already a crisis in our hands. And you see, while we are talking about pregnancy, the worst of them all is now the HIV. So you give me a contraceptive, you've not sorted me out with my HIV. So I think we need to be a little bit more, we know sexuality, we know people are having sex, young people are having sex, but we need to put the whole spectrum, though for this story that was not the intention. But for me now, coming back to the bill, we need to be more intentional, we need to put evidence on the table, and that's why I am saying from a policy perspective, there are frameworks that have already been tested and proven that youth-friendly services, reproductive health services do work, and we have best practices. But at what point do we bring them to scale? So that that scale then reaches everybody, because then touches on the issues of access. But then also that puts to question the issues of beneficence of the healthcare providers, the justice, and the autonomy. Right now, if you honestly ask me, and I've asked this question to many doctors, is there anything that stops a doctor when a young person or an adolescent comes and they really see that there's a risk, stops them from helping?
Not quite.
Not quite. So this is just while we are waiting for the bill to be debated, isn't there something that we can do as a society or as a profession?
In the interim.
Exactly.
Well, it's something that was mentioned here, an opinion that was raised as they were watching the story. Linda Mwana says it's a shame that people are more afraid of pregnancy than of HIV. Some of the issues and the themes that have come out, but evidence-based reportage, she's kept mentioning this. But as we continue discussing, we'll be able to see the themes that we can bring out. You've mentioned the religious class, or you know, the religious body that needs representation. We'll have a perspective from the religious body on sex education right after this. Welcome back to PressPass, and we have a health focus here tonight based on the feature that aired last night on NTV Weekend Edition by Mercy Juma Okande, Teen Moms of Kwale, and the responses that we had after the show aired were quite overwhelming. And of course, we are inviting more and more, and basing this on such reportage that is features desk of our newsrooms and the challenges that face us in trying to bring these issues out. We'll be able to hear a bit more about that. The realities in our newsrooms here in Kenya, it's not as glamorous as many would think. But in the first part of this discussion, we had the issue of the religious bodies and also more of the cultural and religious hindrances in trying to push this awareness on contraceptives and protection of our children and who are sexually active. And this actually aired last week on NTV, and it was the opinion of the Anglican Church on sex education in our schools. Let's listen in.
Well, the Anglican Church now says it is against sex education in schools. Archbishop Jackson Olesapit says that the clergy collectively believe children should not be exposed to certain information until they are able to comprehend the content. The government is currently in the process of reviewing the school curriculum.
We are worried as a church, and we don't want to encourage the discussion of comprehensive sex education in our schools. I think that will be detrimental to our children, because if we open up for people who will be able to discuss other things, especially we know people who are proponents of gayism and lesbianism will want to bring this debate and begin to introduce as early as that in our schools.
Oh, Mercy Juma Okande almost got out of a chair when she heard that. But this was brought to my attention. Actually, Collins Basonyi wrote to some of our colleagues in Daily Nation and myself as well on the need of right of reply to this particular issue. Just what did you have?
You know, maybe I'm a bit more contained because I've dealt with I've watched it over and over again.
Yes.
And even though I may not have an opinion about personally, I'm not an expert in that area. I may not have an opinion about some of those things that he has said.
Yes.
But that story should not have gone as it is, because the Archbishop has made some very strong claims. He has made claims that if you give children access to sexuality education, then you can introduce them to being gay and so on. And so it becomes very difficult for me to understand why that story was allowed to go out that way. This story should have, as is. I think what should have happened is that the Archbishop should have been put to task about that issue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the journalist or someone should have called and sought something. He should qualify. That's a very strong statement. It should be qualified. Yes. More importantly, I also think that it could have been balanced. We have people who are experts in the area. Okay. There are studies that have been published. In other parts of the world, maybe not in Kenya, but in other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, you find places where there's comprehensive sexuality education and what it meant for the young people there, or age-appropriate sexuality education and what it meant for the people there. And sometimes it is even more important as well to explain to your audience what comprehensive sexuality education is and what age-appropriate sexuality education is, because these are things that not everyone understands. Right. But the thing is, sexuality education is about providing facts, scientifically accurate information, about sexuality, about pregnancy, about sexually transmitted infections, about the act of the process of getting involved in sexuality, including the emotional aspects. And so that story should not have gone out just like that. It should have been challenged.
Yeah.
It should have been more balanced.
To be devil's advocate, probably this was just to state the position of the Anglican Church, or at least the leader of the Anglican Church here in Kenya, to show what its view or stand is. And we can't escape that. And I think you've mentioned your interaction with them in trying to rescue the senator, nominated senator, as she was being attacked, because we have the cultural and religious environment that is not at all too friendly when it comes to sex education and what have you. But in your interaction, Mercy, first of all, your reaction to what you've seen here, and whether you agree with Collins that we shouldn't have let it air just as is. It doesn't mean that NTV holds a position of Ole Sapit. We're just airing what he has said.
To some extent, I agree with him, especially when he says that we should educate the public on what comprehensive sexuality or what this type of education means. I think we should do it actually, because I don't think everybody understands what the term comprehensive sexual education is or what it means. And it is very easy to sway people. When somebody who is in an influential position says something, it's very easy to sway people. Like, it will be very hard for somebody who listened to that bite or who listened to that story of Ole Sapit, and they are a staunch Anglican or they are a staunch Christian, they would go with, believe totally what he says, and it's the gospel truth. So to some extent, I believe we should have told maybe brought in somebody else, even if it's just back-to-back a bite, and say, this is what CSE or comprehensive sexual education means, and all that.
Or we could have challenged
we could have
what
challenged
he said and
it.
asked,
But then,
could you clarify?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we not only educate the pupils and the students about CSE, but just the larger population what it is, so that when we make some comments or when we talk to people, we make it from an informed point of view.
But I'm sure you've interacted with many, whether the stakeholders, the religious leaders, the health experts, and the people on the ground in your capacity. And this is a very emotional and sensitive issue based on our cultural beliefs and even religions. And as you've said, this whole issue of contraceptives didn't just start today, it started way back in the 80s, the use of contraceptives, at least here in Kenya. When we're talking about addressing this issue, giving awareness through the media, we can't ignore the environment that we live in, the highly moralistic, if that's a word, environment that we live in. And in a way, there's conspiracy theories that if we are going to push or, at least say, let's have comprehensive sexual education, then this is pushing for Western agendas, like what now the Anglican Archbishop said, lesbian and gayism education, and accepting it. What's your view in terms of bringing this out and clarifying what the issues are from the different misconceptions?
I want to be the voice of reason here again, and just state that the sentiments may look very alarmist, but for those of us that have worked with the religious leaders for a very long time, not just religious leaders, but even cultural barriers, there are cultural and social issues that even if this bill passed and it went for implementation, there are areas that perhaps it wouldn't be implemented. So children will be drawn out of school for fear of the information they are getting is going to corrupt their minds. But what I want to say is this. We also must, as much as the definition, I want to agree with my two colleagues, that we can't push something without explaining to people what that, the definition of certain terms we are using. When the bill that I talked previously with the Interreligious Council was the people who hosted, all or whoever that is in their membership, we talked about age-appropriate sexuality education, and it was accepted. It wasn't that it wasn't accepted. I think the reaction to comprehensiveness is coming at a time, and you said you are right. You are right in saying we must look when we are reporting. We are within a context and an environment.
Yes.
We also must not. We cannot forget, and we must not be short-sighted to note that certain things have happened, which you, the media yourself, you have reported recently. Things that we are going to do. I don't know what Project X. And things are happening. I personally, I work with girls in school. And issues of lesbianism in school and gayism is not something that is a myth. So when and you realize that the religious leaders, more quote unquote, are the gatekeeper of the morality. So the way, so to speak, the way they are defined in the society. They may not speak to what we believe in, they may not speak, but they are the gatekeepers of what we call ethics and morality. So we need to educate them and work with them so that they get the evidence that I talked about, what this does, or when we don't do this, what it does. Because if we talk about the age appropriate and at what age this information is being given in doses in preparation for a phase, because even before, the culture had it that at a certain age, either you are circumcised and you are given information. Somebody was working with you in stages. And I think when we leave it in that blanket of comprehensiveness and we are not saying, what are we saying to our age 3, age 4? What are we saying? And that information is going to be accessed by others that they are not supposed to get that. They have not matured enough. They have not matured in their heads enough to comprehend and to make the distinction between the information that is being passed. Then I guess that is where we need to work. And I think it is us, the technicians or the professionals and the media, that need to portray that information so that it comes across and they see the sense in what we are trying to say.
Right.
And the right thing, and with evidence that we want to back it off.
Yeah.
And it is true, like he says, it is not that when you give sexuality education to children that they become more promiscuous, as is the connotation. In fact, this is the reverse. Those who have been given that information at an appropriate time usually delay their sexual engagement. So their sexual debut is actually pushed and not at an early age.
Right.
That is scientific.
Okay. Collins, before Mercy comes in giving us the cultural practices or environments that kind of came out in her story, as a development communication strategist or practitioner, I'm sure the Reproductive Healthcare Bill 2014 is of a keen interest to you. What are some of the attempts that or partnerships that you have with media and the dynamics that you have in trying to engage the media and bringing this to the fore?
So, what we're trying to do, one of the things that we've realized, and I, as I'd mentioned to you earlier, I've had the benefit of working in a newsroom.
Yes.
Earlier on in my career, and I have a good idea about how a newsroom operates, and how a journalist operates. And one of the things that I realize is that no one sits anyone down in a class and gives them this kind of information. So one of the things that we've realized is that as much as possible, provide journalists with information. And I've had a bit of an easy time with at least the ones from print media, simply because there are those ones who have identified as as health reporters and health journalists. So they have that interest and they are pushing it through. And so what we are doing with them is that every so often, if I see if we have an opinion about an emerging issue, and we've documented this information, I share it with them and we talk to them. And I think even Mercy, has been a recipient of this. So for those ones of us in the advocacy side, what we're trying to do is now we are trying to become the link between the technical people who are happy to engage in their world, without putting out information, and the media, and the media is where majority of Kenyans get their information from. And so what we are trying to do is that we are trying to share information back and forth. So if I hear something interesting from, from my technical people, I find a way of packaging it and sharing it with, with the journalists that we have on board. I think that is a good, step. Maybe we are a bit, I was a bit, harsh earlier on, because the truth is, the news cycle is, it happens, very quickly. And so everything is fast and everything needs to be, to go out. And so maybe what we could do is that, with time we could just keep, adding the kind of knowledge that they have. Yeah. But at the end of it all, this one requires interest. Yeah. This particular field requires interest because you have to read a lot. You have to, interact with data. You have to read KDHS. KDHS is a very big, it's a very big document. You have to read through policies. You have to read through bills, and you have to, to have someone that you can, you can call and work with. And so, from my end, I think what can work for us in supporting journalists who are, reporting in this area is, tipping them off on story ideas, providing them with, in places where they can find information. Yeah. If they need data, you can link them up with the data because you have access to, the technical people, and most importantly, you can link them up with the, with the newsmakers.
I'm sure we're not short. Yes, we're not short of ideas. Dr. you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to follow up on what he's saying, because recently, I think last week on Tuesday and Wednesday, we had a media training on microbicide, which is the new generation of what is in the pipeline of scientific research for prevention of HIV. Yeah, and we had to take the science reporters, journalists, on how to report, and one of those ingredients means what is the facts, what is the history behind this, what is a microbicide, so that they can define it correctly and then report correctly. What does it do? What does it not do? What is the limitation? And even when you are saying that the 1% did not or had an adverse effect, what does that adverse effect mean? That a 1% adverse effect means that the 99% should not benefit from a good product? So no. So I think it is us, the technician and the media, to get to an interface where we share the information and we package it and pitch it at the right place so that it is understood.
Mercy, even in the 19-minute piece, the part of the Reproductive Healthcare Bill 2014 features somewhere in the middle for a few seconds, and I don't know, you'd tell people how this would feature in a news bulletin when there's drama around it, when there's people criticizing the sponsor of the bill and there's some controversy. That's when it features. But as it features reporter and editor, rather reporter, let me not hire you where you're not yet hired. You tell us the environment that you work in, because it's not too easy. It's not a walk in the park. As he said, it takes interest, and it took your interest to work and do this particular story. Who helped you in this, in packaging this?
It's true, Mark. Okay, being a science journalist basically just needs you to read a lot, talk to a lot of people, delve into a lot of data and all that. So it is a lot of work just from where you start doing your research before you go out to the field and get your data and facts right and all of that. And you require a lot of support, especially as a TV journalist, because you can never work alone. It's not like in print where I can just take a camera and go out and find my stories, get some pictures and come back into the newsroom and file a report. I need to have a full team. So first of all, that's where the support starts. From the cameraman to the video editor to the driver.
The graphics person.
Yes, the graphics person and even the editors, the news editors and all that. It's a complete set of people working on one story. But the most important thing for a science journalist is the support while he or she is in the field.
Yes.
And just the facilitation to go out in the field and do these stories. And there are some organizations that help us to go out on the field. Like for this one, I got help from Japaigo. And they are the ones who helped me out in the field and even helped me get some of these people that I talked to. So it is not just about the newsroom and the people, the editors in the newsroom, all these stakeholders, some of them have really come out to help us and sponsors, like Dr. says, the trainings and all that. We need that to come up with these stories. And some of these stories are not stories that you tell in a day or two. You just can't send me send me out to Kwale and tell me I'm giving you 2 days to come up with these stories. It's impossible.
Right.
Sometimes you need like 10 days in the field. I've done stories where I've stayed in places like Turkana for 2 weeks. But again, we are in an environment which is making money, which is out to make money. So sometimes you find it is really hard for somebody to take you out or to sponsor your stay in the field for such a long time. And
or even for an editor to let you be away
yes,
for 2
or
weeks.
even an editor to let you go out in the field for 2 weeks. But I think it's high time we realize that for science reporting, you need time to be in the field. Or even just to produce anything good, you really need time to be in the field. You don't need to restrict my timelines to 2 days and tell me you have to work within 2 days. That's when I come with half-baked stories. That's when I come and you ask me, but where is the other story? Or they start raising questions and telling me, oh, you only talked to the Anglican Church. Why didn't you find this other person
Right.
and all that? So I think support from both the newsroom, where you work, and the stakeholders is very, very important. But for me, especially from the newsroom, because that is the outlet that is going to carry your story. At the end of the day, it is the name of Nation Media Group or any other media group out there. It is not the name of the stakeholder that is going on air.
Don't worry, I'm not trying to get you to put our managing editor on the line here, because by far we can tell that you had a lot of good support in making this story a reality. But something you've mentioned and something we'll talk about after the break, Collins asked, where was a voice of the religious groups in Kwale when you were doing the story, and Daktari earlier had mentioned
About
about the men. Where were the men in telling this particular story? So we'll get to that and the other dynamics of this particular area of telling stories at the features area when we get back from this break. But remember also, we have this coming up. News report will give us a blow-by-blow account of the action-packed week. Welcome back to PressPass. We are using Teen Moms of Kwale that aired last night on NTV Weekend Edition as a basis of our conversation, just to help us understand what it takes to tell this kind of story from interest areas, health sector specifically, and also the scientific sector. And it was mostly on the issue of contraceptives being used by young girls, teenage girls from Kwale. And during one of the breaks, Dr. Christine asked Mercy Juma, where was the voice of the men in this 19-minute piece? Where was the voice of the men? Takes two to tango.
All right. I guess I only brought in the main towards the end when I talked about male participation when it comes to family planning and the support they give us women. First of all, we live in a society that majorly believes that issues of family planning or contraception are issues of the woman. Like, just go sort yourself out. If you listened or you watched that story, you'd hear about the man who said it's the lady's duty to know her safe days, and then we can work around that. And then there's also the myths and misconceptions, which are not really being brought about by the men, but even the women. But this one was a man who said that when I asked him if he knows that there is something called vasectomy, and men can also do family planning or use contraceptives, and he told me it is unacceptable because biblically one cannot go to heaven if they are barren, and contraceptives or vasectomy makes a man barren. So that is the issue of myths and misconceptions surrounding use of contraceptives. It is a topic that needs to be addressed on its own, because there's all these issues about, oh, it causes cervical cancer, it causes fibroids, it causes people to be infertile. I think that should be addressed. Maybe I'll just leave that to Daktari. It is something that should be addressed so that we know what are the myths and what are the truths about contraceptives. But when we talk about the voice of the men, first of all, that is why there's something we call follow-up stories or day 2 journalism, which here will be maybe like week 2 or week 3 journalism.
Or month 2.
Yes. There's something called day 2 journalism, whereby you go and do a follow-up on a story that you did. And even when I was in the field, I felt this is an issue I should tackle, but I couldn't package all these into one feature or give people all this information at an instant. You'll find that for most of these girls, the 14, 13, 15-year-olds who are pregnant, most of them told me the men who made them pregnant are not really men, they are boys.
Okay.
2 of them were impregnated by a class 6 and a class 7 boy. So that brings in another whole set of discussion. What are we telling our boys? We're only talking about the girls. But these boys are the ones who are doing this. So this class 7 boy told the class 4 girl, nionyeshe ishara ya mapenzi, and they did it. And the girl says she didn't know that by doing that she's going to get pregnant. So we need to talk about what we are telling the boys or what we are teaching the boys, not just about the girls. Just because the girls are the ones carrying the evidence of pregnancy, it doesn't mean that the conversation should only center around the girls. We should talk to the boys and also talk to the men. A doctor told me very few men, if at all, walk into a family planning facility with their women and sit together and seek for advice from the doctor, asking the doctor what should we do, what method should we use. No, it's just you go sort yourself out, you'll find me waiting for you here at home. So the men, very few men take part in the process of seeking for contraception services or family planning services. That is another discussion. So when we talk about the voice of the men, I don't think that is even a subject that should fit in this story. It should be a 20 minutes feature on its own.
On its own?
Yes.
Right.
On why men do not want to go through vasectomy, on why the boys are the ones doing this, but you're not talking about this. Or just even tell the story of this boy, class 7 boy, who impregnated a class 4 girl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that would be hard to convince a young man to confess of his deeds. But Dr. the explanation there suffices?
I think this is a whole area of gender issues, and gender analysis needs to be done on every programming that one does,
right,
especially which involves human behavior or human activity. We need to do a gender analysis. And you find that if you're programming HIV, the gender analysis is very critical because it brings those things that are specific to women, those things that are specific to boys, those things are specific to girls and men. The reason being that people have been socialized differently, people have the centers of how you get your communication and information. Boys get it. You may find that that boy, they use the love as a bait of what they want. But if girls, so the myths and misconception around the gender stereotyping issues and the gender roles coming into play, I think is a whole, and she says really the men engage is a critical element in programming, and we cannot leave it behind, because if men are not convinced that whatever their partners are doing, leave alone the adolescents, even as a big adult like myself, if I'm married, and if my partner doesn't want to believe something like he will not go to heaven like that man did, then that means even for me, for my decision making, which is a power game, which is controlled mainly by men in a household, will be very difficult for a woman, and sometimes you depend on him on your economics. So if this is withheld, what does a woman do? So this is a whole gender dimension that needs, for each and every programming, a gender analysis, a thorough in-depth gender analysis must be done before we get what is practical needs of men, what are the practical needs of women, and then we begin to plan around that. Thank you.
Is it an issue more of attitudinal change, and is it really our place as media to change the attitude, or is this really cultural, and it will take more stakeholders to address this, not just media?
See, Mark, the issue of sex, whether it pertains to adolescents or grown-ups, it's a complex issue.
Yes.
But if I specifically talk about the issue of adolescents, we need to look at it from a wholesome perspective. It's a social issue. And that's why religious leaders need to be on board in the conversation. Our parents, teachers, and all these other stakeholders. It's a health issue. If we don't talk to young people about these things and empower them, they start, they become pregnant at a very young age. They get infected. AIDS is the biggest cause of deaths amongst young adolescents in Kenya. And we have, it's a political issue. We have seen politicians running around giving women 5,000 shillings, congratulating them for their husband's good work. It's an economic issue, because the girl who gets pregnant when she's young, she's going to be an economically crippled for a while, because if she doesn't go back to school, then it becomes a problem. So for me, because it is such a multifaceted issue, we need to look at it from a perspective, from a long-term perspective. And I think it's important for us to, what Mercy did in her story can be a good starting point for us to have a conversation.
Right.
And in this conversation, for me, what from my perspective, what I see as the ultimate outcome for this is that policymakers will sit on the table. Again, it's a political issue, because health is a devolved function. Yes. And so it's a political process, getting resources allocated for family planning, which now will, help young people to access youth-friendly, services at public health facilities. Some of all these issues will come into play. And so for me, I think, the biggest outcome from, some of these stories that, Mercy and her colleagues are doing would be, we have this conversation, we identify where the problems are. Our young people are aware of some of the issues that they are facing when they engage in sexual activity. Then we could educate them on this. Media, can become on board and invest time, and expertise on it, so that we can tell the story of how we are having sex as Kenyans, all the way from adolescents all the way to the old guys.
I'll give you a chance to respond to some of the links that you sent me and said you have an issue with this People Daily, desperate parents introducing girls to family planning, and I think this is from Daily Nation editorial, address premature sex, and you'll tell us a bit more. I'll give you time to put your thoughts in order. But Mercy, how it plays out in terms of in a newsroom, the focus that it will get sometimes when it bleeps in the radar of a news cycle, where someone makes a very controversial statement. That's when we will have this focus given to it. But if you were to say next week, I want to go and do a follow-up, it would be very hard. But our commitment, what can you say is your commitment or plan moving forward in following this kind of a story?
I think moving forward, it is very important that we address the issues that we as journalists or a newsroom, and also the public and the stakeholders, feel were not addressed in this story or other stories that we've been doing. And that goes back to issues like male participation, the economic bit of it. When I was in Kwale, somebody told me that you can actually do a story on contraception based on M-Pesa. Yes.
Okay.
This is how you do it. This girl has given birth to 2 kids. She has to take them through school. And all that, she comes from a poor background. If you look at your M-Pesa transactions, how many transactions there have been sent to people who are asking you for school fees for their children, to contribute for school fees for their children? Not because they are orphaned, or just because it's a young mom or something like that and she cannot take them to school and all that. So I think we need to broaden the way we think about these issues, and not just look at them from the point of what is being discussed today, or what is happening, or who is debating what, but also look at it from all these issues, the political bit, the economic bit, and all that. So I think our focus right now as the Features Desk is to just look at things beyond teenage pregnancies and teenage contraceptions, go into the myths and misconceptions, go into male participation, go into the economic impact of all these, and eventually, and hopefully, and that is our main priority, come up, or our story should come up with policy change.
Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will inform, or at least stories like these teen moms of Kwale will inform the bills that are being discussed right now.
Sure.
and the structures that are being put in place to govern this whole sector. You're interacting with K24 journalists, I believe, in the next few weeks to send them out. And moving forward, is this your commitment to inform the discussion around the bill and even this comprehensive sex education?
So from the work that I do, we have components. and this is something that I can make a case of for very easily. It is for instance, if I receive a request, say from, and I think this is awesome. If I would receive a request from any of the journalists that I'm in contact with, including herself, if she writes me an email and tells me, Collins, I have this idea and I want to go ahead and do this story, it is very easy for me to go back and talk to my my country director and tell him, this is a very good story. I think it is going to, in the large scale of things, help us in our advocacy efforts. Because for us, it's an issue of, we are trying to persuade everyone, to think about sexual and reproductive health, especially for young people, as an important issue. And this story would do it, and such a story would do it. And so for me, I think it's an issue that we can treat on a case-by-case basis. I'm very happy to keep engaging with journalists to see how and where we can support them.
Right. Yeah. Just quick response. Address premature sex editorial that was on the Nation.
Yes. I'm going to lump the two of them together.
September 27th. Yes.
Yes. Because the problem that I have with these stories, whether it's the one appearing in the People or the one appearing in the Daily Nation, is that we sensationalize an aspect of the story. And because we've sensationalized an aspect of the story, then it becomes difficult for someone to get the real issue. So, yes, as journalists, I think all of you are out of the top of your minds, you're bound to tell the truth,
accuracy,
and being accurate, right? And sometimes some of those headlines have an accuracy issue, and you're also supposed to be balanced, right? And when you tell your story and you've already someone has already spoken about the fury of parents and teachers concerning a bill, but they have not gone and talked to young people and asked young people, what is the challenges? What are some of the challenges that you're facing? And so, from my perspective, I think it's important for journalists, even though we have deadlines to meet and we have readers to attract, it is important to remain, to tell accurate stories. Yes. It is important to tell balanced stories. And I think it's important for us to remain fair and impartial in telling those stories. Because I think for the Nation, the editorial appearing in the Nation, my problem with it is that it felt unbalanced. Okay. The person writing it, I could tell their opinions from that piece. So I think it's important for us to just go back to the principles of journalism and, follow that.
Mercy, and you could agree with me here, if we were to do stories where we are going to the youth and asking them, the 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds in urban setting or even in the rural setting, and asking them, do you want more access, in trying to inform the discussion around the bill to access to contraceptives, there are those naysayers who will be saying you're promoting immorality and you are accepting something that shouldn't be in our society. And Daktari, those are kind of the attitudes that Mercy Juma, when she goes out to do a story, that's what she would receive in saying, you're joining people in accepting this act of immorality within our youth by telling these stories, going to the youth and asking them, do you want more access to contraceptives? But from your expertise, expert opinion, how should we address this moving forward?
In my view, socialization or places of socialization that give people information so that they make informed decision is critical. And one of those socializing agents either at the home level, before you move out to school, and before you move to places even where you worship, or places that socialize a person, or communities. So I guess the information, what we need to sort out is how much awareness or how much information are we going to do? These are the structural issues. We sort out policy issues, then we look at the structures for delivering on that policy, and are people having information so that they can pass? For example, this story, if I look at the mother who was holding 2 grandchildren, if you gave her information of what to tell those girls before they delivered, I'm sure right now she would be an advocate for other girls and tell them the right things to do. So I guess we have not just sorted out and looked at our entry points into what we need to do. More often than not, we actually talk to a general mass and thinking that a human being is amorphous. And when you tell me a story, or when we tell it mass to everybody, that everybody takes it and articulates it and act on it the same way. That is not true. Another thing that I want to put on the table, that adolescents or youth trust their healthcare providers, but there they have also been failed. So I think the attitude that we adopt at even healthcare providers to young people when they come to our spaces is something that we need to build more on, building capacity of providers, or get another cadre, or get their peers to begin to get the language that gets us them. So I think it's a mix of things, but also getting into resources. If we want to congratulate her, she has already gotten her story out, and she may not get an opportunity to engage with another story like this for a long time.
Yes.
Why can't the state also devote systems where this information is passed in an appropriate manner at an appropriate time? Yeah, for me, because we need also to ring-fence the monies he talks about devolution. We need to begin at a national level. If you look at the health policy of Japan,
yes,
you will find that certain elements of that amount is ring-fenced. So it comes from the national level, which holds the pass, the national pass, but it is ring-fenced to do what it is meant to do up to the level, because the priorities are set right. So I think we need to set priorities, but also as a parent, we lost something in parenting. And I think we need to regain certain values in our parenting. Yeah, because who stays with my child, who passes information? I can tell you that some teachers, if you give them a condom, they will not touch. They will run away. So how will they then, even if we are talking comprehensive, sexuality education is being put in school, who is going to talk about it? Because even that teacher needs somebody to talk to their child, because they will not touch even a condom.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christine Sadia, chairperson of the Medical Women Association, but was sitting in her capacity as a public health advisor and strategist. Thank you for your time and the wisdom that you've shared. Basonia Collins, thank you very much. DSW, the communications officer there, and you interact with media houses. I hope you'll be giving an opportunity to our features desk to go and tell out more stories. And I hope, Mercy Juma Okande, that our newsroom, our managing editor, who I hope is watching, will give you more time and the space and allowance to work on such stories that tell the reality on the ground in more time and in more focus, not just the 2.5-minute pieces that we have every week here on our bulletins. Thank you for the great work you've done. Thank you to Robert, thank you to Job Soy, thank you to Ali, and also the video editor, and also the team that made this possible here on PressPass. And I'll leave you, hopefully this will tickle you, on a light note. This past week has been action-packed, the kind of drama that would make it to the Nollywood movies. Now, from the brawl in the Nairobi County Assembly to another one at a Nairobi restaurant between two respected members of society, Kinyajui gives us a blow-by-blow account. Enjoy. Thank you for watching.
Members of the Nairobi County Assembly were on Thursday involved in a scuffle after Viwadani MCA Samuel Nyangwara tabled a motion to impeach Governor Kidero. It was a shameful scene, and in the footage, female members are seen watering the fighting members so that they can at least grow up. This week's news have been action-packed as former Deputy Speaker Farah Maalim and Somali ex-communication minister Mohamed Musa were also caught fighting on the Serena Hotel CCTV cameras, but at least they were professional about it. First, they are seen debating on whether to eat first or just get into it. Mr. Musa seems to have expressed his reservations on fighting inside the hotel. He wanted them to go outside. Hakutaka kuagukia pilao ya wenyewe, and that is why he held back on the first consignment of slaps that were delivered on his cheeks. Appearing on NTV's AM Live show on Monday, Mr. Farah Maalim had this to say about the incident.
There were no blows. I mean, there was a little bit of fracas and a few here and there. By the way, the man is already a minister in the government, not a former minister. That video you see there was acquired by a senior politician from Garissa illegally.
We could not believe that he blamed this on piracy.
But the fact of the matter is that it's also a thoroughly edited thing.
Which means this was a movie ad.
That's now water under the bridge. We have our own traditional family ways of resolving such things.
On this particular point, I agree. This was surely a traditional way of dispute resolution. Interestingly, Mr. Maalim further shed some light on the history of violence by Kenyan leaders.
You remember our very first head of state, Jomo Kenyatta. I remember Peter remembers him very much. It's not something to be proud of, but when he gets pissed off, sometimes he used to run with a bakora against his own ministers. So our old immediate former president before this one, Kibaki, say Pumbavu, Mavia Kuku. Once in a while, politicians can lose their cool.
About the Nairobi MCA scuffle, Guesswork has stumbled upon footage that gives an impression of how an MCA prepares for office. Representing the Guesswork fraternity on PressPass, it is the one and only